What's good YouTube, and welcome to the house. Today I want to answer one of the most simple in structure questions that has one of the most complex answers in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Any novice duelist coming into the game is going to ask you this question when trying to learn the game, and that's, what's the most powerful card in all of Yu-Gi-Oh? And some people are gonna think, ooh, it's attack points, it's strength. Some people are gonna think it's the ability to deal with a board, and others are going to come to the conclusion that it's based off of advantage. And there are so many cards in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, but I think when we look at the F and L list, the Forbidden and Limited list presented by Konami, and scroll down into the ban section, we find two cards that go head to head, and without a shadow of a doubt are the contenders in my mind for best card ever created in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's go ahead and talk about these suspects. This old duelist has been playing for quite some time, since he was 13 when Legend of Blue Eyes, Starter Deck Kaiba, and Starter Deck Yugi all came out, and I became more so aware of what a metagame was somewhere around Metal Raiders when my older brother showed me online messaging forums. That's how ancient I am. But during the third set of Yu-Gi-Oh! Comes a card called Painful Choice that reads as follows. Select 5 cards from your deck and reveal them to your opponent. Your opponent selects one card among them, add that card to your hand, and discard the other cards. Now, if you're a modern day player and you've never read this card, I'm sure the cogs in your head are immediately churning on what you could potentially do. But even back then, it immediately lets you get a card from deck to hand among 5, and even though your opponent chooses that, you can select 5 powerful cards, meaning you're guaranteed to get one powerful card to your hand. But the other payoff is that you get graveyard resources, and even back in the day, we're talking Invasion of Chaos, when the Chaos monsters appeared, you wanted to start sending cards to your card graveyard. We also had promotional cards like Sinister Serpent come out that would be resources in the next turn thanks to Painful Choice. So Painful Choice already back then was busted and able to tutor out cards from deck to hand, able to give you free advantage in the graveyard, and by today's standards, I think this would be one of the nuttiest cards in the game by far. To show you how insanely powerful Painful Choice is, let's look at another card on the Forbidden and Limited list named Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial reads, send one monster from your deck to the graveyard. That's it. Pretty simplistic, yet this card is such a huge problem in the game, it is restricted to playing one copy per deck, mainly because it doesn't have that once per turn clause, and resourcing the graveyard has become so insane in today's game. Now let's put Foolish Burial next to Painful Choice, and it looks like that meme, you versus the guy she told you not to worry about. Painful Choice is sending 4 cards to the card graveyard versus just this one, and it doesn't have to be restricted to just monsters. You are then going to replace its advantage in hand with another card, so you could either just go for 5 busted cards, which was argued for back in the day, but you would actually lose that advantage in your deck because cards were so freaking good back then, or you can go for 5 cards that you want in the card graveyard out of your deck to attempt to play through later and add consistency to your deck, because there were cards, I'm not going to want to draw this later, I want it in the grave now, or I can just get it added to hand and get things I want in the graveyard right now. With Foolish Burial being problematic by even today's game standard, look at Painful Choice in a modern day deck such as Duelist Alliance's own Burning Abyss, a deck that has been around for 4 whole years that still manages to top events today and even take 1 or 2 down without a dedicated Link monster. The Burning Abyss would have a field day with this card. Not only would you be able to send 4 different Burning Abyss monsters to the graveyard, you would probably add a 5th one to hand, triggering many of their effects, and you haven't even normal summoned yet. You have Seer, you have Skarm, you have Graph, all of them just begging to get to the graveyard so that you can actually play, and going second you could send something like Farfa to actually deal with something on your opponent's board, and they can only give you 1, meaning you're going to be able to pop off relatively well compared to then if you're just using Foolish Burial for 1 card. The ceiling for this card also dates back to cards like LIGHTSWORN, where you could have sent 3 Wolf and they're probably going to give you one to your hand, and then 2 other cards you might want in the graveyard, and then pitch Wolf for something like Lumina or Solar Recharge. This card just has such a high ceiling by getting the bad cards you want milled out of deck directly to the graveyard and then activating their effects. I assume if Konami were to bring this back, it would be some kind of excavation effect and then trying to put the cards back in deck rather than letting you put them in the graveyard. But they haven't even tried to reimagine this card because it's just so gosh dang powerful, and there's not really a great way to put it back into the game currently. With such an amazing effect to actually go into your deck, resource 5 cards, send 4 to the graveyard, and actually self-replace in hand to where you have the same number of cards before activation is pretty insane. So what card actually rivals this in all of Yu-Gi-Oh? What could possibly... Oh, the memes are coming. I can already feel a good chunk of you guys typing furiously into your keyboards trying to get that first comment of, but what does it do? I'm of course talking about Pot of Greed, and it has one of the most simple text in all of the game. Draw 2 cards. Now, if you're playing a different card game, you probably have much different standards for what this would do for you, but other games tend to have some kind of activation requirement or cost, such as if this was Pokemon now, being a trainer, you'd have much better cards to activate as your 1 trainer per turn, or if you're looking over Magic the Gathering, having this kind of a cost, you would think replacing 1 card for 2 would be really good, but it's not always the case because you want to use your mana resources. So by means of Yu-Gi-Oh, having a 0 cost activation of a card that allows you to add 2 more cards to the hand actually makes you feel like you're in the anime and you're about to pull out of a situation that you previously couldn't because you couldn't deal with the situation on board across from you with just 1 card. You specifically needed 2. I think if we're to parallel Pot of Greed to another card on the Forbidden and Limited list that's a much less powerful version of itself, as we did with Painful Choice versus Foolish Burial, it would be Upstart Goblin. Upstart Goblin reads as follows: draw 1 card, then your opponent gains 1,000 life points. Objectively just far worse than Pot of Greed. Upstart Goblin does not give you a plus and advantage and returns something to your opponent, where Pot of Greed simply gives you an extra card compared and still thins the deck. Now, why does Upstart Goblin find itself on the limited list at all? It seems like it's giving your opponent something and just self-replacing. Well, that's the point. By playing Upstart Goblin, you play 40 cards in Yu-Gi-Oh, yet you have 3 of these in deck, making them essentially blank slates. This gets you to your core strategy much faster than your opponent who would not be playing 3 Upstart Goblins, allows you to get to your power cards, field spells, and other strategies just so much faster by having them in deck. I think if you stop and take a look at both of the cards I've selected to go head to head as the most powerful card in Yu-Gi-Oh, you'll see that they have something in common, and that's that they both generate advantage in one way or another. Pot of Greed has unrivaled advantage creation, turning at no cost 1 card into 2, no commitment, nothing to the opponent, and every advantage is given to the person who activated. However, I think I have to give this win to Painful Choice. Painful Choice in today's game could send 5 cards where it doesn't matter what your opponent picks. You'll be happy with the card that you're adding to hand and popping off with all 4 effects in the card graveyard that you were sending. It no longer requires your opponent's choice. You're just going to pop off. Even when Painful Choice was legal and it mattered what your opponent would choose with what you were getting out of your deck, you could pick 5 amazing freaking cards because the game was so busted back then and would replace itself with another amazing card, or you could resource your graveyard as mentioned before, and that's the reason that Painful Choice ends up being one of the first ever forbidden cards in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! In April of 2004. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is such an expansive card game with a very rich history, so I want to hear in the comments section down below if you think I got it right right, or if you have a different opinion, state the card that you think is the most powerful in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And give me your reasoning as to why. But if you enjoyed the conversation in general, give this video a thumbs up and please subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be actively looking in the comment section below and replying to some of you with arguments that are very well made. Thanks for watching.